At my age, mornings don't start with coffee, they start with pills. 74 is no joke, and my joints remind me of that with every movement. I set 5 colorful capsules on the kitchen table, pour a glass of water, and drink them one by one. Outside the window, Garland is waking up. You can hear the noise of cars, someone's conversation, a dog barking. The town is small, but noisy. My name is Rupert Hinckley. I've worked my whole life as a storekeeper in a furniture warehouse. It wasn't the most prestigious job, but it allowed me to buy this house, raise 3 kids, and put some money away for my old age. I've never been a spender. My father taught me to appreciate every dollar, and I'm grateful for that. I look at Elaine's picture on the dresser. My wife died 10 years ago of cancer. We lived together for almost 40 years. Sometimes I think she's still here, in the rustle of the curtains, the creak of the floorboards, the smell of her favorite flowers that I continue to grow in the garden. After she died, the children began to visit me less and less often. At first, I thought it was normal. They have their own lives, worries, things to do. But as time went on, I realized it was more than that. Without Elaine, I became something of a burden to them, an old grouch who was a waste of time to talk to. I have 3 children. The oldest, Garrett, lives 2 hours away, works as an insurance inspector. He comes to see me every 3 months, makes sure I'm okay, and leaves before he's spent 2 hours with me. The middle one, Flora, teaches elementary school in a neighboring town. She calls more often, sometimes visits with her grandchildren, but I can see how uncomfortable she is in my presence. It's like she's doing an obligation rather than visiting her father. And then there's Violet, my youngest, 38 years old, and she acts like a teenager. She's always been spoiled. My fault, I admit. Since Elaine died, she's been completely out of control. She works as a realtor whenever she wants. Now she's flush with cash. Now she's calling me for a loan to pay the rent. She changes men like a glove, and every time she's sure she's found the right one. Last month she met another, the one, a musician named Dexter Fay. I'd only met him once when Violet brought him to Sunday lunch. Tall, thin, with tattoos on his arms and neck, his hair in a sloppy bun. He's 35, but he looks about 45, the consequences of a rough life, as he puts it. "Dad, Dexter's in a band called Midnight Shadows," Violet said proudly as she introduced us to each other. "I'd never heard of them," I answered honestly. "No wonder," Dexter smirked, displaying a gap-toothed grin. "We play real rock, not the stuff they play on the oldies radio." Violet giggled, but I didn't say anything. Why argue? Even then I could see that the man was a crook. After dinner, when Violet went to the bathroom, he asked me if I had an extra $20, as if I'd left my wallet at home. I gave him the money, knowing I'd never see it again. "Don't mess with him," I told Violet as they were about to leave. "He's no good for you." "Jesus, Daddy!" She rolled her eyes. "You say that about every guy I go out with. You don't like anyone." "Because you're picking the wrong people." I tried to be calm, but I could feel the irritation building. "This Dexter guy is using you. You don't know anything about him." She grabbed her bag and headed for the door. "He's talented, driven, and has a great future. Violet, he's 35 and he plays basement bars for tips. What future?" She slammed the door without answering. I sighed. This wasn't the first conversation we'd had like this, and I knew it wouldn't be the last. I hadn't heard from Violet for 3 weeks. Then she called and said she wanted to stop by. It was a strange voice, not angry, not hurt, but kind of tense. She arrived towards evening. She looked pale, dark circles under her eyes. Violet usually took great care of her appearance, but this time even makeup couldn't hide her haggard appearance. "Tea?" I offered. "Yes, please." She sat down at the table, nervously rubbing the bracelet on her wrist. I put the kettle on and took out the cookies she'd loved since she was a child. Something was wrong, and it worried me. "How's Dexter?" I asked, trying to sound neutral. Violet flinched. I don't know. We broke up. Oh, I tried not to look too pleased with the news. What happened? Nothing much, she looked away. It just didn't work out. I knew she wasn't telling me the truth, but I didn't press her. We drank tea in silence. Finally, Violet took a deep breath. Daddy, I'm pregnant. The cup stopped halfway to my mouth. I slowly set it down on the table. From Dexter? She nodded, looking into her cup. Does he know? He knows. Violet's voice trembled. That's why he left. I felt anger rising in me. That irresponsible musician abandoned my daughter when he found out about the baby. Typical coward. I'm sorry, Violet, I said, trying to stay calm. What do you plan to do? Keep the baby. She looked up at me. I'm 38, Daddy. This might be my last chance to be a mother. I nodded. What could I say? It was her decision. I'll support you in any way I can, I said sincerely, morally and a little financially. At the word financially, Violet's eyes changed. There was a familiar calculating glint in it. Actually, Dad, that's what I wanted to talk to you about, she straightened. I need money. Not just a little, but a serious amount. How serious? I asked, feeling my insides tighten. I need to buy a bigger house. There's no room for a baby in my apartment, and I won't be able to work at first, so I need a financial reserve. Plus all those expenses for doctors, clothes, stroller, crib. I listened as she listed, and with each item the amount grew. Finally, she stopped talking and looked at me. And how much will all this cost? I asked quietly. I think, she paused, I need all your savings, Dad. I blinked, not believing my ears. All my savings? Yes. I know you have a decent amount set aside. She was speaking fast now, like she was afraid I'd interrupt. You don't need it anyway. You live in your own house. Your pension is enough for food and medicine. And I need to provide for the future of your grandson or granddaughter. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. In 50 years of working, I had saved every extra dollar I had. After Elaine died, I became even more frugal. I actually had a decent amount of money, a little over $120,000. I planned to spend some of that money on the lake house that Elaine and I had always dreamed of, a place where I could photograph nature and fish, two of my main hobbies. The rest was to go to the children after I died, equally to each of them. Violet, I can't give you all my savings, I finally said. I can help with the first expenses. Give me your savings for my baby, she interrupted me, raising her voice. It's your grandson, Daddy. Are you really that selfish? It's not about selfishness. Yes, it is. She jumped up from her chair. You've always been like this, saving up money, trembling over every cent, and for what? To keep it in your account until you die? You'd better give it away now so it can be put to good use. I was planning to divide it between the three of you after you die? She grinned bitterly. How noble of you. What am I supposed to do now? I need that money now, you know? I looked at my daughter and didn't recognize her. Where was the little girl I used to carry on my shoulders? Who brought me her drawings and waited for praise? At what point did she turn into this demanding, selfish woman? Violet, I'll give you 5,000, I said firmly. That will be enough for the first time. And then we'll see. 5,000? She laughed, but it wasn't funny. That's not even enough for a down payment on a house. Dad, I need at least 100,000. I can't give you that much. Can't or won't. She squinted. You have that money. I know you do. It's not a question of whether I have it or not. Yes, it is. She raised her voice again. You just don't want to help me and your grandson. You'd rather have the money sitting in a bank account until you die of old age. Violet, stop it. I was beginning to lose my patience. I offered to help you. If that's not enough for you, that's your problem. My problem? Her eyes widened with indignation. My problem? I'm pregnant, alone, unsupported. And you, my own father, refuse to help. I'm not refusing to help. I refuse to give you everything I have. Violet looked at me with such contempt that it physically hurt. Then she grabbed her bag and headed for the door. You're going to regret this, Daddy, she said over her shoulder. Believe me, you will. And she left, slamming the door again like she'd done hundreds of times before. I sat at the table, staring at the tea and the untouched cookies. My mind was spinning with one thought. When was she going to grow up? The phone rang close to midnight. I was already in bed, reading an old detective novel that I was rereading for probably the third time. Daddy. Violet's voice sounded different, softer, with a slight huskiness, as if she'd been crying. I'm sorry about today. I was wrong. It's all right, I replied, surprised at the quick reconciliation. No, it's not okay, she paused. I shouldn't have pressured you. It's just that I was so scared. Being alone with a baby is scary, Dad. I understand, I said, and I really did. But you'll get through it. You're strong. Not as strong as you think I am, she sighed. Look, let's talk calmly tomorrow. I'll come over to your place and we'll talk about it, okay? Okay, I agreed. Be there by lunchtime. As I hung up the phone, I was relieved. Maybe this baby would really change Violet for the better. Make her grow up and take responsibility. She arrived at 12, looking much better than she had yesterday. Her makeup hid the traces of tears and her hair was neatly styled. She was wearing a simple summer dress, not the flashy mini she usually wore. I made lasagna, I said. Your favorite, with eggplant. Thanks, Daddy, she smiled and kissed me on the cheek. You're the best. We sat down at the table and ate in silence for a while. Then Violet put her fork down. Daddy, I want to apologize for yesterday, she began. I had no right to demand all your savings from you. It was selfish of me. I'm glad you realize that, I nodded. But I do need help, she continued, looking me in the eye. Not all of your money, of course, but half? I almost choked. Half? Yes, she nodded, as if it were a reasonable offer. 60,000. That's enough for the down payment on the house and for the time until I can get back to work. Violet, I set my fork aside. You know I'm saving up for a lake house. It's been a dream of mine and Mom's. Dad, she took my hand. Mom would want you to help your daughter and grandson in a time of need. You know that, don't you? I felt uneasy at how cleverly she was using Elaine's memory. I'll help you, Violet, I said, but not with 60,000. I can give you 10. Her face changed. The smile disappeared. Her eyes narrowed. 10,000? Are you kidding me? What am I going to buy with 10,000? Half a crib? That's enough to rent a bigger place until you go back to work. Rent? She raised her voice. Are you suggesting that your grandson and I live in a rented apartment when you have money lying around that you don't spend? Violet, that money. Give me your savings for my baby. She jumped up from her chair, her face contorted with anger. You owe it to me. I am your daughter. That's why I'm offering to help you, I said calmly. 10,000 is a lot. It's nothing. She grabbed her bag. I know how much you have in your account, Daddy. Mom told me before she died. Over 100 grand, and you won't share it with your own daughter and grandson. Violet, sit down and calm down. I tried to speak softly and evenly. No. She's heading for the door. I thought you loved me. I thought you'd be happy to help. And you're just an old cheapskate who doesn't think of anyone but himself. She stormed out of the house, slamming the door loudly. I heard her car engine start, the squeal of tires, and silence. I sat at the table, staring at the uneaten lasagna, feeling defeated. Am I really a cheapskate? Maybe I should give her the money? After all, this is my grandchild. But something inside me resisted the thought. I knew Violet. I knew how she handled the money. Today she swears she'll spend it on the baby, and tomorrow she'll buy a new car or a fur coat, and then she'd come to me again with her hand out. No, I've decided. 10,000 is my final offer. And if she doesn't accept it, that's her problem. The phone rang towards evening. 15, Violet said instead of greeting me. What? 15,000, she explained. That's my final price, and I'll leave you alone. I sighed. More haggling, like at the market. Violet, I said 10, and this is my final word. You'll regret it, she said, her voice threatening. I swear you'll regret it. And she hung up. The next week was hard. Violet called me every day, sometimes several times. At first she tried to pity me by telling me how bad she was feeling, how she was suffering from toxicosis, how she was worried about the future of her child. Then she started demanding money again, gradually reducing the amount, from 60 to 50, then to 40,000. When I remained adamant, she hung up the phone with curses. On Wednesday, she arrived unannounced. I was just finishing trimming the rose bushes in the garden. Elaine loved roses, and after her death, I'd continued to tend them. Violet drove up in her red Ford, slammed the door, and came straight toward me without saying hello. 25,000, she said instead of greeting me. That's my final offer, Dad. I straightened up, feeling my back protesting the sudden movement. I put the pruning shears aside and wiped my hands on my gardening gloves. Hello, Violet. I'm glad to see you. Don't shirk. She crossed her arms over her chest. 25,000. Yes or no? I looked at her carefully. Dark circles under her eyes, lips pressed into a thin line, fingers tapping nervously on her forearm. She really did look exhausted. Let's go inside, I said. We shouldn't discuss this outside. There's nothing to discuss. Just answer yes or no. I sighed, took off my gloves and put them on the garden bench. No, Violet. My offer is the same, 10,000. No more. She looked at me as if I'd said something absurd. You don't understand, do you? I'm not asking you for all the money. I'm only asking for a quarter of your savings. A quarter, for my own grandson. That doesn't change the matter. I headed for the house. Let's go inside if you want to talk. She followed me, still muttering something to herself. In the kitchen, I poured us both some tea. Violet sat down at the table, drumming her fingers on the countertop. I saw the doctor yesterday, she said, calming down a little. Everything's fine with the baby. 8 weeks. That's good. I set the cup in front of her. How are you feeling? Terrible. She took a sip. Constant nausea, headaches. I can barely go to work. And how are things with work? I asked cautiously. Do you get a lot of clients? Not so much, she grimaced. The real estate market is down right now. People aren't buying houses. I nodded. Violet was always making excuses for her professional failures. The market was bad. The neighborhood was unpopular. Her colleagues had screwed her over. What about Dexter? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Violet tensed. He left, she said quietly. He packed his things and left when I told him about the baby. I was silent, waiting for him to continue. Said he wasn't ready to be a father, that it would ruin his career, she grinned bitterly. What the hell kind of career? He's 35 and playing in bars for tips, she paused. You were right about him, Dad. Are you happy with him? No, I shook my head. I'd rather be wrong. We sat in silence for a while. Then Violet spoke again, more quietly. Daddy, I really need the money. I can't raise a child in my one-room apartment. I need a house, at least a small one. A place to have a nursery, a daycare center. You want your grandson to grow up in a normal environment, don't you? Of course I do. I sipped my tea. But why does it have to be at the expense of all my savings? Violet, I've been saving this money for 50 years. I've been saving a little every month, denying myself a lot of things. For what? She moved forward. What did you save it for, Papa? I was silent for a moment, gathering my thoughts. This conversation was inevitable. Your mother and I once dreamed of a cabin by Cedar Lake, I said at last. Small, simple, a place to fish, to photograph nature, to enjoy the quiet. After she died, I kept saving up for that dream, and now I can almost make it come true. A lake house? Violet looked at me with disbelief. Are you serious? You're 74 years old, Dad. Why do you want a lake house? To live there, I answered simply. To spend the rest of my days doing what I love. What about us? She waved her hands. Your children, your grandchildren. You can come visit, I smiled, imagining us all sitting on the veranda, watching the sunset over the water. There would be rooms for everyone. Violet looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Are you suggesting we drive 100 miles out of town to spend the weekend in some cabin by the water? It's not a shack, I started to get annoyed. It would be a nice house. Maybe not as big as the one here, but comfortable. Dad, she said slowly, as if explaining something to a child, you're living in an illusion. None of us will be traveling to see you there. Garrett's too busy. Flora's got kids and work. I'm having a baby soon. You'll sit there alone like a hermit stewing over your money. Her words hit me harder than I expected, because deep down I was afraid she was right. It's my decision, Violet, I said firmly, and my money. Which we'll get when you die, she retorted. But why wait? Why not use it now, when we really need it? 10,000, Violet, I looked her in the eye. This is my last word. She stood up from the table so abruptly that the cup tipped over and the tea spilled over the tablecloth. You're going to regret this, she hissed. You're going to regret it. And she left again, slamming the door. It was quiet for 3 days. I began to hope that Violet had cooled down and accepted my proposal. But on the 4th day, I got a call from Garrett. Dad, what's going on between you and Violet? He asked without preamble. What did she say to you? I answered a question with a question. That you refuse to help her with the baby. That she's asking you for money for a place to live and you're offering her some crumbs. I sighed. Of course, Violet had put it all in a favorable light. I offered her 10,000, Garrett. That's not crumbs. She says it's not worth it to you to give her 50. 50? I almost choked. Yesterday she asked for 25. Then she needs more than she thought. Garrett's voice sounded cold. Dad, he's your grandson. Don't you want him to grow up in a good environment? Of course I do. But why do I have to give up half my savings to do it? Because you can afford it, and Violet can't, Garrett said. What's more important to you, the money in your account or the well-being of your daughter and your grandson? He hung up without waiting for an answer. Flora called in the evening trying to mediate, but even she recognized that Violet was overreacting. She insisted, however, that I should raise the amount to 15,000 to help my sister. On Sunday, all 3 showed up at my house unannounced. We came to talk, Dad, Flora said when I opened the door. The whole family. I let them into the house, feeling my heart start to beat faster. Dad, Garrett began as we settled into the living room, the situation is serious. Violet needs support and you— I've already offered to help her, I interrupted. $10,000. That's not enough. Flora shook her head. Considering the cost of housing now. And she'll be alone with the baby, Garrett added, without the support of a father. I understand all that, I said, but I can't give her half my savings. I've been saving it all my life. For what? Asked Violet, who had been sitting silent until now. For your stupid lake house? What's the point of that, Dad? You're 74. Violet! Flora pulled her back. No, let her answer. Violet stepped forward. What do you want that money for? To keep it in an account? To spend it on some stupid whim when your daughter and grandson need help? It's not a whim. I tried to remain calm. It's my life's dream. What about my dream? Violet raised her voice. To give my child a normal life. That's more important than your fishing. I looked at her and saw her getting more and more agitated with every word. Garrett and Flora looked at each other, clearly uncomfortable. Violet, I began, I understand your situation. You don't understand anything. She jumped to her feet. If you did, you'd give me the damn money. But you don't care about me or your grandson. You never cared about any of us. You only care about yourself. That's not fair, I objected. I've spent my whole life taking care of you, working. For what? She interrupted. So that in your old age you can sit on a pile of money and refuse to help your children. I'm not denying you help. I offered you 10 grand. That's not help. It's a handout. She was on the verge of hysterics. You just don't want money for your own daughter. Violet, calm down. Garrett stood beside her. We're not going to solve anything this way. How are we going to solve it? She turned to him. He won't listen. He doesn't care about any of us. That's not true. I got up too. I love you, all three of you. But that doesn't mean I have to give you everything I have on demand. But we are your children. Violet turned to me again. Wasn't it for us that you saved that money? Some of it, yes, for you, after I die. And part of it is to fulfill my dream. Your dream, she laughed bitterly. Do you hear? His dream is more important than his grandson's future. Flora tried to intervene. Can't we all calm down a little and— No! Violet cut her off. I'm not going to calm down. I want him to say straight out that money is more important to him than family. I've never said anything like that, I objected. And you know it. But you do. She pointed her finger at me. You're choosing your savings over the well-being of your daughter and your grandson. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Listen to me, Violet. I've offered you $10,000 in aid. That's a lot of money. If it's not enough for you, I'm sorry. But I'm not going to change my mind. She stared at me for a few seconds, then turned to Garrett and Flora. You see? See how selfish he is? What a cheapskate. Violet, Garrett began, but she interrupted. No, let him be blunt. What's more important to him, the money or his grandson? I've already told you my decision, I said. I'm not going to change it. Then listen to mine, she stepped close to me. Either you give me $50,000 or you'll never see me or your grandson again. Take your pick. After the kids left, I sat in silence for a long time, looking at Elaine's picture on the mantel. What would she say? What would she do if she were me? I could almost hear her voice. Rupert, you don't have to give away everything you have. You've earned the right to your dream. Violet's ultimatum continued to echo in my ears. Either $50,000 or I would never see my grandson. How could she? How could my daughter put me in front of that choice? I stood up and walked to the window. Evening Garland was glowing with lights, people hurrying about their business, an ordinary life that now seemed foreign to me. Suddenly I realized I didn't want it anymore. I don't want to live under pressure, to make excuses for my decisions, to feel guilty for having my own dreams and plans. I'm 74 years old, for crying out loud. How long do I have left? 5 years? 10 if I'm lucky? And how do I want to spend them? By giving in to the blackmail of a daughter who will never be satisfied no matter how much I give? No, I deserve better. I deserve what Elaine and I dreamed of, a lake house where we can greet sunrises with a fishing rod in hand and photograph sunsets, a place with nothing but silence and nature. The decision came suddenly, but with such clarity that I wondered why I hadn't thought of it sooner. I would leave. Right now. I'll take my money and leave Garland forever. The idea, which had seemed crazy at first, made more sense by the minute. What's keeping me here? A house where every corner reminds me of Elaine, but where I now live alone. The children who only remember me when they need something. Grandchildren I see 3 or 4 times a year. And Violet. Well, she's made her own choices. If she's willing to use her child as a weapon against me, then maybe I'm really better off not seeing her or my grandson. I sat down at my desk and began to formulate a plan. I would need to withdraw the money from my account, all 120,000 of it. I'd have to gather the essentials. I didn't have much. Sort out the formalities of the house, maybe rent it out for a while, until I decided what to do next. Feeling more energized than I'd felt in years, I went up to the bedroom and pulled an old suitcase from the top shelf of the closet. I started folding clothes, choosing the most practical and necessary. A few shirts, a pair of pants, a sweater, a jacket. In another, smaller suitcase he put photo albums, some books that he reread over and over again, fishing gear. Then I went down to the living room and took Elaine's picture off the wall, the one of her smiling, standing on the shore of Cedar Lake on our last vacation together. Carefully, I wrapped it in a sweater and put it in my suitcase. In the kitchen, I gathered my papers, passport, insurance, medical records, bank statements. I folded it all neatly into a folder and put it in my bag. It was past midnight when I finished packing. I sat back in my chair, feeling strangely calm. Tomorrow I would go to the bank, withdraw all the money and leave. Start a new life, with no looking back. In the morning, I woke up at first light. I had a cup of coffee, checked my suitcases again. Did I have everything? Then I called a cab to the bank. At the bank, I approached my manager, Mrs. Price, who had handled my finances for the last 15 years. "Mr. Hinckley, it's good to see you," she smiled. "What can I do for you today?" "I want to close my account," I said bluntly. Her smile faded slightly. "Close it? Are you sure? You have one of our oldest accounts with a great interest rate." "I'm sure," I interrupted. "I want to withdraw all the money." "All of it?" She was clearly surprised. It's quite a large amount of cash. Maybe you want to transfer it to another bank." "No, I want cash." Mrs. Price looked at me with concern. "Mr. Hinckley, do you mind if I ask why you want such a large sum in cash? It's not exactly safe and—" "I'm buying a house," I answered without going into details. "The seller prefers cash." It wasn't exactly true, but it wasn't exactly a lie either. I was indeed going to buy a house, I just didn't know which one or where. Mrs. Price was still hesitating. "Maybe you should think about a bank check. It's much safer than carrying around that much money." "I prefer cash," I insisted. "It's my money, Mrs. Price, and I want to withdraw it." She sighed. "Of course, Mr. Hinckley. That's your right. But you'll have to wait. We need to prepare such a sum. Perhaps you could come back this afternoon?" I agreed and left the bank. It was still a few hours before lunch, and I decided to take a walk through Garland, the city in which I had lived most of my life. I walked down familiar streets, past the stores where I shopped, past the park where I walked with my kids when they were little, past the school they went to. So many memories, good and not so good. I remember the first time I brought Elaine to Garland. We were young, just married, and I had gotten a job in a warehouse. We rented a little apartment on the edge of town, and Elaine said, "We'll be happy here, Rupert." And we were happy, in spite of all the difficulties. Then Garrett was born, our firstborn. We moved to a bigger house, took out a mortgage that we paid off for 15 years. I remember Elaine planting the first roses in the garden, how we painted the walls in the nursery together. 3 years later, Flora was born, our quiet, sensible little girl. She was so much like Elaine, the same attentive eyes, the same soft smile. She never gave us any trouble, did well in school, helped around the house. And finally, when we were no longer expecting it, Violet appeared. Our late joy, our unexpected gift. Elaine was already 38 when she was born. Maybe that's why we spoiled her too much. Maybe that's why she grew up the way she is, thinking the world owes her everything just because she exists. I stopped at the window of a photography supply store. Once upon a time, a long time ago, I dreamed of being a photographer. to take pictures of nature, to travel, to show people the beauty of the world through my lens. But life arranged otherwise. I had to feed my family, pay for a house, save for college for my kids. Photography remained a hobby I did on the weekends. After lunch, I went back to the bank. Mrs. Price was waiting for me with a look of humility on her face. "We've prepared your money, Mr. Hinckley," she said, "but I'd still like to make sure that you understand the risks involved in keeping such a sum in cash." "I do." I nodded, "and I take full responsibility." She sighed and led me into a separate room where the bank manager and another employee were waiting for me. There was a metal case on the table. $120,000, the manager said, opening the case and showing me the neatly arranged stacks of bills. "Are you sure you want to take it all?" "I'm absolutely sure," I answered without hesitation. They made me sign some papers, then closed the case and handed it to me. It was heavier than I expected, the physical weight of 50 years of labor and saving. "Good luck to you, Mr. Hinckley," Mrs. Price said as I left. "And be careful." I nodded and walked out of the bank, holding the case tightly. I hailed a cab and drove home, feeling strangely excited. I'm really doing this. I'm really getting away with this. At home, I hid the money in one of my suitcases, among my clothes, then sat down and wrote a short letter, which I will leave on the table. "Dear children, I have decided to fulfill my mom and I's dream and buy a house by the lake. Don't worry about me, I will be fine. I will contact you when I am settled in my new place. Love, your father." That wasn't entirely true. I wasn't going to contact them anytime soon. I needed a break from their demands, from their judgment, from their expectations. I spent one last evening in the house that had been mine for over 40 years, walked through the rooms, touching the walls, the furniture, reminiscing. In this room, Garrett took his first steps. This is where Flora read her first books. This is where Violet threw her 16th birthday party, turning the whole house upside down. And here, in Elaine's in my bedroom, she spent her last days. This is where I held her hand as she left, promising her that I would take care of the kids, that everything would be okay. I kept my promise, didn't I? I took care of them, gave them everything I could. And now that they're grown, don't I deserve a little peace? A little time to myself? In the morning, I loaded my suitcases into the cab and looked back at the house one last time. Goodbye, old friend. You've been a good home, but now my life will be somewhere else. Where are we going? The cab driver asked. To the bus station, I answered. I decided to take a bus instead of a train or an airplane. Less chance that someone would remember me. Less paperwork, tickets in my name. Just an old man with a couple suitcases, one of many. At the bus station, I bought a ticket to Pinewood, the small town by Cedar Lake where Elaine and I spent our honeymoon. I hadn't been there in 45 years, but I remembered it as a quiet, peaceful place, perfect for starting a new life. As I waited for the bus, sitting on a hard bench, my thoughts returned to the children. How would they react when they realized that I was really gone? That I wasn't just gone for the weekend, but disappeared from their lives? Garrett would probably shrug and go back to his business. He's always been self-sufficient, aloof. Flora would worry, probably cry. She had always been the most sensitive of them all. And Violet will be furious. At first, she won't believe I've really gone. Then, when she realizes it's true, she'll call, threaten, demand. And when that doesn't work, she'll panic. Because her plan didn't work. Because she won't get the money she was counting on. I felt a strange satisfaction at the thought. Not gloating, no. I still loved my daughter, despite all her flaws. Rather, it was a sense of liberation. I was no longer a pawn in her games. I made my move, and it was unexpected. The bus arrived right on schedule. I took the window seat and watched Garland disappear around the corner. My home, my life, my past were all behind me, and ahead was the unknown, but also freedom. I dozed most of the way, waking up only at stops. We passed small towns, fields, forests. America outside the window was vast, diverse, and beautiful. And somewhere out there, by Cedar Lake, a new home was waiting for me. At the same time, Violet pulled up in front of my house. It had been 3 days since our last conversation, and she had decided it was time to soften up and accept my offer. 10,000 wasn't 50, but it was better than nothing. Besides, she was sure she could extort more from me when the baby was born. She rang the doorbell, but no one answered. She knocked, and there was no answer. Went around the house looking in the windows. Empty. My car wasn't in the driveway, but that didn't mean anything. I often walked or took the bus. "Daddy," she called, knocking on the door again. "Daddy, are you home? It's me, Violet." There was silence. Only the wind rustled the leaves in the garden. She took out the key I'd given her years ago, just in case. She opened the door and came in. "Daddy?" she called again, but the house was empty. She walked through the rooms, looking in each one. Everything was in its place, clean and neat, just like I always liked it. But something was wrong. Something missing. She noticed it when she entered my bedroom. The closet was ajar and she could see the empty hangers. There was no picture of Elaine on the dresser that always stood there. My toothbrush, razor, and reading glasses were not in the bathroom. Violet began to panic. She went down to the kitchen and only then noticed the letter on the table. She read it once, then again, unable to believe her eyes. "No," she whispered. "No, he couldn't." She rushed to the phone and dialed my number. Long beeps, no answer. Tried again, same thing. Then she called Garrett. "Dad's gone," she said as soon as he answered. "He's gone and he's taken all his stuff." "What do you mean he left?" Garrett's voice sounded sleepy, as if she had woken him up. "I'm at his house. There's no one here. Some of his things are gone, and he left a note saying he's gone to live by the lake." "Calm down, Violet," Garrett yawned. "Daddy often talked about buying a house by the lake. What's so surprising about that?" "What's surprising is that he did it right now, after we talked about it. He ran away, Garrett. He ran away from us. From you, you mean." Garrett's voice had a hint of irritation in it. "After you gave him an ultimatum." "It's not, I didn't," Violet stammered. "It doesn't matter. What matters is that he's gone, and we don't know where he's going." "What do you suggest?" Garrett asked. "Should we organize a search operation? Dad's a grown man, Violet. He has the right to leave if he wants to." But what about me? What about the baby?" Violet was close to hysterics. "He promised to help. He was supposed to give me the money." "He offered you 10,000, Garrett reminded her. "You refused." "Because it wasn't enough," she was almost screaming. "And now he's gone, and we don't know where he is or how to contact him." "He says he'll contact us when he's settled in." Garrett's voice sounded tired. "Let's just wait." "Wait?" Violet couldn't believe her ears. "Don't you understand? He ran away from us, from his responsibilities, from his grandson." "Violet," Garrett sighed, "Dad doesn't have to provide for you and your child. He offered to help. You refused. Now live with your choice." He hung up, leaving Violet in shock. She dialed Flora's number, but she didn't show much concern either. "Daddy always wanted to live by the lake," she said. "I'm glad he's finally realized his dream." "But what about us?" Violet asked. "What about me and the baby?" "What about you?" Flora sounded incomprehensible. "You work. You have an apartment. Dad offered to help you, but you refused." "I didn't refuse," Violet exclaimed. "I just asked for more." "And I gave him an ultimatum," Flora reminded her. "Frankly, Violet, I'm not surprised he left. You gave him no choice." "Me? I gave him no choice?" Violet gasped with indignation. "He gave me no choice. He refused to help me when I was in trouble." "He didn't refuse to help," Flora repeated patiently. "He offered 10,000. That's not enough." Violet raised her voice again. "I need more. I need a house, money for the baby, money to live on. Then get a better job, Flora was beginning to lose patience. Or ask the baby's father for money, or take out a loan. Don't put all the responsibility on Daddy. I'm not. Violet was almost crying. I'm just asking for help. And he ran away. He ran away like a coward. Violet, Flora's voice grew harsher. Daddy is 74 years old. He's worked all his life, provided for us, given us everything he could. Now he wants to live a little for himself. He's entitled to that. And I have a right to his help, Violet insisted. I'm his daughter. A grown-up daughter, Flora emphasized. Who has to solve her own problems? The bus pulled into Pinewood Station in the early evening. I struggled to get up from the seat, my joints aching from the long ride. The driver helped me get my bags, nodded and wished me luck. I was alone at the small bus stop, in a town I hadn't been to in almost half a century. Pinewood had changed, but not as much as I'd expected. The same wide streets lined with pine trees, the same wooden houses in the style of the last century, the same atmosphere of calm and measuredness. Only there were new stores, cafes, and the old hotel where Elaine and I spent our honeymoon had been transformed into a modern hotel. I took a cab to this hotel, the Pine Coast as it was now called. The young woman at the front desk smiled welcomingly when I asked for a room. How many days are you staying with us, Mr. Hinckley? Rupert Hinckley, I answered. I'm not sure yet. Maybe a week or two. I'm looking for a house to buy. Oh, you're moving to Pinewood? She smiled even wider. That's a wonderful choice. We have a very quiet, friendly little town. I know, I nodded. I was here years ago on my honeymoon. How romantic, her eyes lit up. And you're coming back with your wife? No, I shook my head. My wife died 10 years ago, but we always dreamed of coming back here someday. I'm fulfilling our mutual wish. Her smile became a little sad, but still warm. That's very touching, Mr. Hinckley. I'm sure your wife would be pleased. I was thinking the same thing on my way up to the room. Elaine always said that someday when the kids were grown, we'd go back to Pinewood and buy that little blue house we'd seen by the lake. It seemed perfect to us, with a porch that looked right out to the water, a garden full of wildflowers, and a view of the sunset. The next morning I went to a local real estate agency. A young agent named Parker Boone was enthusiastic about helping me find a house. What exactly are you looking for, Mr. Hinckley? He asked, opening his laptop. Size, location, budget. A small lakeside home, I answered. 1 or 2 bedrooms with a porch. Budget up to $100,000. Parker whistled. For $100,000, it's hard to find something on the shore now, he said honestly. Prices have gone up in recent years, but I've got a couple of options that might work for you. One of them is a little over your budget, but it's really worth it. We agreed to meet in an hour to look at the first house. I went back to the hotel, grabbed my camera, an old but reliable digital camera I'd bought when Elaine was still alive, and went out again. Parker showed me 2 houses, but they didn't fit. One was too big and expensive, the other wasn't on the beach. When hope began to fade, he suggested another option. I have another house, Parker said. It's not quite on the market, meaning it's not officially for sale. The owner, Mrs. Foster, is thinking about moving into a nursing home but hasn't made up her mind. The house is old and in need of repair, but the location is great, right by the water. We drove a few more kilometers along the shore, turned onto a narrow dirt road and found ourselves in front of a small blue house, standing on the edge of the lake. My heart raced. It was it, the same house Elaine and I had spotted 45 years ago. It's amazing, I mumbled as I got out of the car. Yes, the place is really beautiful, Parker agreed, not understanding the reason for my excitement. The house certainly needs some repairs, but the foundation is solid. Inside the house was simple. A living room with a fireplace, a small kitchen, 2 bedrooms, a bathroom. Old furniture, faded curtains, worn wooden floors. But there was something homey, something that made me feel like I was back in a place I'd been before. "How much?" I asked, standing at the window, looking out at the lake. "The owner is asking 85,000, Parker replied. "But I think she'll settle for 80. As I said, the house needs repairs, but—" "I'll take it," I interrupted. "For full price, if Mrs. Foster is willing to sell." The deal was done quickly. I paid cash, no mortgage or other complications. Mrs. Foster, an 82-year-old widow, agreed to sell the house after I met with her in person and told her why the house was so important to me. She was delighted that her home would go to someone who really appreciated it. "I've lived here for 50 years," she said as we sat on the porch of her soon-to-be-my house. "Raised 2 children, buried my husband. Every corner holds memories. It will be hard for me to leave, but I know I can't live here alone anymore. There's too much work to do around the house and garden." And so, less than 2 weeks after leaving Garland, I sat on the veranda of my own lake house, watched the sunset, and felt a strange calm. It was as if the pieces of the mosaic were finally coming together and everything was falling into place. The first few days in the new house were spent in pleasant chores. I cleaned, tidied, repaired what I could repair myself. The neighbors, there were few of them, the houses were far apart, turned out to be friendly people. To my left lived the Taylor family, a husband, wife, and 2 children who came for weekends and holidays. On my right, half a kilometer away, was an elderly Dunning couple who lived here permanently, as did I. It was Mr. Dunning, Oliver, who showed me the best fishing spots on the lake. He was an avid fisherman and was happy to know that I shared his passion. "The bite is best at dawn," he said as we sat in his boat in the middle of the lake. "Especially at that headland over there, see? There are some great bass there." I nodded, making a mental note. "I'll try fishing there tomorrow." "How long have you lived here?" I asked, casting my rod. "Almost 20 years, Oliver said. "My wife and I moved here when I retired. Best decision we ever made." I understood him. Only a week here, and already I felt better than I had in years in Garland. Fishing in the morning, gardening or housework in the afternoon, photographing the sunset over the lake in the evening. The simple, quiet life that Elaine and I dreamed of. But Garland wouldn't let me go so easily. Violet called daily, sometimes several times. I saw notifications of voice messages, but I didn't listen to them. Garrett called a couple times, Flora once. To them I answered briefly, saying I was doing well, that I was happy with the new house, but didn't give an address or the name of the town. One evening, sitting on the veranda with a cup of tea, I ventured to listen to the messages from Violet. There were many of them, and the tone varied from one to another. "Papa, where are you? Call me back immediately." The first message, left the day I left, sounded demanding. "Daddy, this isn't funny. You can't just disappear like this. I'm in trouble. I need your help." The second, a day later, already with a hint of panic. "You selfish old man. Abandon me when I'm pregnant. What am I going to tell my child when he asks about Grandpa?" A third, 3 days later, full of anger. And so on. Accusations were replaced by pleas, threats by promises to make things right if I came back and helped her. In the last message, left yesterday, Violet cried, "Daddy, please just let me know you're okay. I'm worried. I realize I was wrong. Just call me back. Please." I sat looking at the phone and felt a strange mix of emotions. Pity for my daughter, who really was in a difficult situation. Anger at her manipulation and selfishness. Guilt for disappearing without saying goodbye properly. But at the same time, the certainty that he'd done the right thing, that it was the only way to break the unhealthy bond that kept us both in a state of perpetual struggle. I decided that I would answer her, not now, but soon, when I was ready, when I could speak calmly, without bitterness or resentment, when I was fully settled into my new life. In the meantime, I had a lot to do. The house needed attention. I had to replace a few rotten boards on the veranda, paint the walls, fix the fence. The garden was overgrown with weeds, and I spent hours clearing paths, trimming bushes, planting new flowers, the same varieties Elaine loved. I bought a new fishing rod and went to the lake every morning at dawn, sometimes alone, sometimes with Oliver. Fishing always calmed me, allowed me to clear my head of unnecessary thoughts, to concentrate on simple, understandable actions. And in the evenings I took pictures. Sunsets over the lake were incredible. Every day a new palette of colors, a new play of light and shadow. I bought a memory card for my camera at the local electronics store and filled it with pictures of the lake, the woods, the birds, the old house reflected in the water. One day, Mrs. Dunning, Martina, saw my pictures and admired them. "You have a real talent, Rupert," she said. "Have you ever thought of exhibiting your work?" I laughed and shook my head. No, it's just a hobby." "Don't be modest," she smiled. "There's a small gallery in town and they sometimes have exhibitions of local artists. Why don't you show them your pictures?" I promised to think about it, though I didn't take it seriously. But the idea stuck in my head. Why not? What have I got to lose? A few days later, I took some printed photos to the Pine Forest Gallery in downtown Pinewood. The owner, a middle-aged woman named Leela Oswald, scrutinized them and, to my surprise, came to love them. "These are wonderful works, Mr. Hinckley," she said, looking at the picture of the lake in the setting sun. "There is something genuine, not staged, not fancy, but real. I'd love to have them in our gallery." I was stunned. I never thought my amateur photographs could interest anyone but myself. Violet's phone never stopped ringing. In 2 weeks, she had left me 30 voicemails. 30! First angry, then crying, then begging, then angry again. She wouldn't give up. I didn't answer. Every once in a while, I'd talk to Garrett and Flora, telling them I was doing well, that I was happy in my new home. They seemed resigned to my decision, though they passed on Violet's request to call her back. One evening, as I sat on the veranda watching the sunset, the phone rang again. Violet. I stared at the screen, pondering whether to answer it. Maybe it was time? Maybe I'd cooled down enough to talk to her calmly. But something held my finger over the answer button. Not now. Not today. Today I just wanted to enjoy my new home, my new life, my newfound freedom. I muted my phone and tucked it away in my pocket, then lifted my teacup as if in a toast, looking at the last rays of the setting sun. "Here's to us, Ellie," I whispered. "Here's to our dream finally coming true." It had been 2 weeks since I'd settled into my new lake house. Life had settled into a calm, measured routine. I would get up at dawn, drink coffee on the veranda, and watch the first rays of sunlight glide across the water. Then I'd go fishing or work in the garden, clearing weeds from the paths and planting flowers. In the afternoon, he usually worked on the house, painting walls, fixing furniture, tidying up everything that needed repair. And in the evenings, he devoted to photography, wandered around the neighborhood with a camera, or sat on the veranda, shooting sunsets. The neighbors turned out to be nice people. Oliver and Martina Dunning often invited me to dinner, and the Taylor family, who came on weekends, always brought fresh baked goods and fruit from the city. They already knew me in Pinewood. Store clerks greeted me by name. The barista at the Main Street Cafe remembered that I liked my espresso without sugar. My exhibition at the Sosnovi Boar Gallery was scheduled for the following month, and I was hard at work preparing, selecting the best pictures, printing them in the right format, selecting frames. Lila, the gallery owner, had already given several interviews to the local paper, talking about a new talent, an older gentleman who sees beauty in the simplest things. Life was good. For the first time in years, I felt truly happy, free, needed. And only one thing marred my days: the continued calls from Violet. She wouldn't give up. Every day, sometimes several times, my phone would ring and her name would pop up on the screen. I didn't answer, but the number of voicemails grew. 30, 40, 50. It was like she was competing with herself to see who could outsmart who. I was sitting on the veranda that morning, enjoying the silence and the view of the lake, when the phone rang again. Violet, of course. I reached for the reset button habitually, but something stopped me. Maybe it was time. It had been 2 weeks since I'd moved in. I've settled in, calmed down, thought about everything that's happened. I might be ready to talk to her. I took a deep breath and pressed the answer button. "Hello," I said calmly. There was silence on the other end of the line, as if Violet hadn't expected me to answer. "Daddy," she finally said uncertainly. "Is it really you?" "Yes, Violet, it's me." "God, at last." Her voice trembled. "I've been calling you every day. Where are you? What's wrong with you? Why did you leave without a word?" "I left a note," I reminded her. "I told Garrett and Flora I was all right." "A note!" she snorted. "Gone to live by the lake. That's no explanation, Dad. You just disappeared, taking all your things and money. I thought something had happened to you." "I'm fine, Violet," I said calmly. "Better than I've been in years." "Where are you?" she asked demandingly. "I'll come to you. We need to talk in person." "No," I answered firmly. "I'm not ready for a face-to-face, and I won't tell you where I am. We can talk on the phone." "Dad," her voice became harder, "you can't just disappear. You have responsibilities, a family. I'm pregnant. I need your help." "I offered you help, Violet," I reminded her. $10,000. You refused and gave me an ultimatum." "I was upset," she exclaimed. "You can't blame me for what I said in anger. I just wanted you to help your daughter and future grandchild." "No, Violet," I shook my head, though she couldn't see it. "You wanted me to give you my savings, the money I had saved all my life, denying myself many things, money that was meant to fulfill my dreams." "And what did you do with it?" she asked with a challenge. "Spent it on some lake house? At your age?" "Yes," I answered simply. "I bought a lake house, the one my mom and I dreamed of all our lives, and I'm happy here." "Happy?" Her voice rose. "How can you be happy knowing that your daughter and grandson need help, that we live in a tiny apartment, that I barely have enough money for food and doctors?" "Violet," I tried to speak softly but firmly, "you're 38 years old. You're a grown woman. You have a job, an education, opportunities. You can provide for yourself and your child without my help." "But it's hard for me," she exclaimed. "I'm alone, pregnant, with no support. Dexter disappeared as soon as he found out about the baby. And you, my own father, chose your selfish comfort over the well-being of your daughter and grandchild." I sighed. Still the same emotional blackmail, the same accusations. "I understand this is difficult for you," I said, "but you chose this man despite my warnings. You chose to keep the child knowing the father wasn't ready to take responsibility. Those were your decisions, Violet, and the consequences of those decisions are your responsibility, not mine." "You're a monster. You monster," her voice broke. "How can you say that? I am your daughter. This is your grandson." "Yes, you are my daughter," I agreed, "and I love you in spite of everything. But I won't let you manipulate me anymore, Violet. I won't let you blackmail me with my future grandchild." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Violet spoke again, and her voice sounded different, calmer, more calculating. "All right, Papa, I understand. You're entitled to your life, to your dreams. I shouldn't have demanded so much of you. Maybe we could start over? I'll come to you, we'll talk calmly, we'll find a compromise." I almost smiled. Violet had always been a good actress. When yelling and accusations didn't work, she switched to a conciliatory tone, to seeming reasonableness. But I knew my daughter too well. "No, Violet," I said firmly. I won't tell you where I am, and I don't want you to come. Not now. But why? Her voice became harsh again. What have I done? Why don't you want to see me? Because I know why you want to come, I answered. Not to make up, but to demand money again. To try to make me go back to Garland and live by your rules. That's not true, she exclaimed. I just want to see my father. I want my child to know his grandfather. Violet, I sighed. Let's be honest with each other. When was the last time you came to me without asking for money or help? When did you call me just to see how I was doing? When were you interested in my life, my thoughts, my feelings? She didn't say anything. We both knew the answer. Never. At least not for the last few years. I've changed, Violet, I continued. Moving here to Pinewood has opened my eyes to a lot of things. I realized that for too long I'd been living a life that wasn't mine. For too long I'd let others decide for me what I should do, how I should spend my money, how I should spend my time. I had let you manipulate me out of guilt, out of fear of losing my connection to you. But that's not going to happen anymore. So you're just cutting us out of your life? She asked bitterly. Me and your grandson? No, I shook my head. I'm not cutting you out. I'm just setting boundaries. I'll be happy to hang out with you and see my grandson when he's born. But on my terms, not yours. No demands, no blackmail, no ultimatums. And the money? She asked me bluntly. The money you promised me? I have spent all my savings on this house, Violet, I answered honestly. I have no more money, except my pension, which is only enough for my modest needs. What? She almost screamed. Have you spent it all? All 120,000? How could you? It was my money, Violet, I reminded her. I earned it with my own labor and I had every right to spend it as I saw fit. But what about me? What about the baby? She seemed shocked. You promised to help us. I offered you 10,000, I reminded her again. You turned it down. Because it wasn't enough, she exclaimed. And now you've left us with no help at all. How could you be so selfish? I sighed. We were going in circles. Violet, I'm not going to discuss this anymore. I made my choice. You made yours. Now we both have to live with the consequences. I'm going to find you, she said suddenly, and her voice became threatening. I'll find out where you live and I'll come, and I'll make you help me and my grandson. How? I asked calmly. How will you make me, Violet? I have no more money that you can demand. The house is in my name and I'm not going to sell it. What will you do? I'll take you back to Garland, she blurted out. You're an old man, Daddy. You're 74 years old. I can tell you that you're not fit to live alone, that you need guardianship. I can get a court order. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. Violet had always thought of me as a naive, easily manipulated old man. I expected something like this, I said calmly. That's why, before I left Garland, I visited my doctor and underwent a complete examination, including a psychiatric evaluation. I have documentation that I am fully capable of living on my own. In addition, I have changed my will. Your will? Her voice trembled. Yes, I confirmed. Before, I'd planned to divide everything I own between you, Garrett, and Flora equally. But it's going to be different now. If anything should happen to me, either naturally or because of some unexpected circumstances, my house and all my possessions will go into a special trust. Half the proceeds will go to charity, a quarter to Garrett and Flora, and a quarter to your child when he's 21. Not you, Violet, the child, and only when he's an adult. You can't do that, she gasped with indignation. I am your daughter. You can't disinherit me. I can, I said firmly, and I did. My lawyer, Mr. Goldman, keeps a copy of the will. He knows about our, complicated relationship and your threats. If anything happens to me, he'll turn the documents over to the police. You think I'm capable of hurting you? Her voice was full of resentment. Her own father? What do you take me for? The man who threatened me with custody and forced return to Garland, I answered. The man who used his own unborn child as a blackmail tool. I'm not saying you're going to physically harm me, Violet. I'm just protecting myself from every possible scenario. There was silence on the other end of the wire. I could only hear Violet's heavy breathing. Finally, she spoke, and her voice sounded cold and detached. You're going to regret this, Papa. You'll regret it very much. I don't regret it, Violet, I answered calmly. For the first time in years, I felt that I was doing the right thing, that I'm living my own life, not the life that others are forcing on me. And it's a wonderful feeling. Goodbye, she said, and hung up. I sat on the veranda, looking at the lake and thinking about our conversation. It hurt. It hurt to realize that my own daughter only saw me as a source of money, that she was willing to threaten me, to blackmail me, to use her child as a weapon against me. But along with the pain, I felt relief. It was as if the heavy weight I'd been carrying all my life had finally fallen from my shoulders. I told her the truth. I told her everything I'd accumulated over the years. And most importantly, I didn't give in to her manipulation. I didn't let guilt and fear control me. I got up from my chair and walked across the veranda. The day was clear, sunny. The lake sparkled like a mirror, reflecting the blue sky and white clouds. In the garden I had cleared of weeds. The first flowers were beginning to bloom, the same varieties Elaine loved. I pulled an old photograph out of my pocket, the one of Elaine and me standing on the shore of this very lake, young and happy, full of hope and plans for the future. I'd brought it with me from Garland, and now it stood framed on the dresser in the bedroom. I did it, Ellie, I whispered, looking at the picture. I made our dream come true. Better late than never, right? It seemed to me that the light breeze that flew over the veranda brought me her answer. Better late than never, Rupert. After talking to Violet, I decided to take a walk along the shore. The lake was calm, the water clear to the bottom. I walked slowly, enjoying the silence, interrupted only by the cries of seagulls and the rustling of leaves. On the way, I met Oliver, who was fixing his boat on a small jetty. "Good morning, Rupert," he greeted me. "It's a beautiful day, isn't it?" "Wonderful," I agreed, coming closer. "Fixing the boat?" "Yes, it's a little leaky," he nodded. "I want to go fishing tomorrow. Will you join me?" "I'd love to," I smiled. 6 o'clock in the morning, like usual. "Right." Oliver clapped me on the shoulder. "Are you okay? You look a little pensive." "Just a difficult conversation with my daughter," I answered honestly. "Nothing serious." Oliver nodded understandingly. We weren't close friends, not yet, but he already knew my history. He knew why I'd moved to Pinewood, leaving my home and my life behind. "Family is complicated," he said philosophically. "Sometimes the people we love the most are the hardest to understand." "That's a good point," I agreed. "But I believe things will get better with time. When the dust settles, when the emotions subside, maybe we can build a new, healthier relationship." "I don't doubt that," Oliver smiled. "You're a reasonable man, Rupert, and I think your daughter will realize that too when she cools off." I wasn't so sure, but I nodded, not wanting to go into the details of my complicated relationship with Violet. Back home, I decided to write letters to Garrett and Flora, real letters on paper that I would mail. I wanted to explain my decision to them, to tell them about my new life, to invite them to visit when they were ready, and when I was sure they wouldn't bring Violet with them. I sat down at the old desk I'd gotten with the house and began to write. The words flowed easily. I talked about Pinewood, about my lake house, about my neighbors, about fishing, about the pictures that would soon be on display at the local gallery, about how peaceful and good it felt to be here, how I finally felt like I belonged. I didn't blame them for not taking my side in the conflict with Violet. I understood that it was hard for them to choose between their father and sister. I just wanted them to know that I loved them, that I wasn't gone from their lives forever, that I would be happy to see them and their children in my new home. When I finished the letters, I sealed them in envelopes and set them aside to mail tomorrow when I went into town. Then I took my camera and went to the lake shore. The sunset promised to be especially beautiful today. And indeed, the sky seemed to be ablaze with all shades of red, orange, and gold. I took a few pictures, then just sat on a rock by the water and watched the sun slowly sink below the horizon. In that moment, I felt a deep, quiet contentment. Yes, the conversation with Violet had been hard. Yes, I was hurt by her threats and accusations, but I knew I had done the right thing, that I had finally found the strength to break the unhealthy cycle of addiction and manipulation in which we had been locked for so many years. I thought about the future, about the exhibit of my photographs that would soon open at the gallery, about fishing with Oliver tomorrow at dawn, about planting new flowers in the garden, painting the bedroom walls, fixing up the old boat I found in the shed behind the house, thinking that maybe one day Garrett and Flora would come to visit me, bring their children, that we'd sit on the porch, watching the sunset, talking, laughing, that maybe even Violet will someday realize that money isn't the most important thing in life, that she would bring her child, my grandson or granddaughter, and we would start over on a new, healthy basis. The last rays of the sun colored the lake a deep purple. I took one more picture, then turned off the camera and just sat back, savoring the moment, the silence, the beauty, the peace. For the first time in years, I felt like I had done the right thing, that I was where I was supposed to be, that I was finally living my life, not the one forced upon me by circumstances or the expectations of others. I looked at the sunset over the lake and smiled.